Well, happy Saturday, folks. The real Captain Kirk here. We're live from One Bethlehem Plaza here on the 6th of June. It is now officially meteorological summer, which starts on the 1st, as well as the hurricane season starts here on the 1st. Had some severe weather move here through eastern PA here in our headquarters. Got about a half inch of rain. It didn't need all the severe weather. Had some high winds here. But again, that'll be moving through New York City here this evening and then off the coast here. But much needed rain for the farmers. We'll take it. Looking to see these storms here from Weather Trends 360 camera south. Again, boom, they hit here late this afternoon and approach from the west here. Again, you can see the nasty weather here. So again, we'll take the rain. Didn't need the high winds. Thought we'd ask the sunny robot here, tell me about El Nino, droughts, and fires here. Again, it's going to be a theme in the near term here, but this will be replaced with the floods will be the theme as we get into the later summer, fall, winter. Right now, we're still at 78% of the country in dry to drought phases. That's the most in 26 years, 34% above average. This time last year, only about 50% of the country in dry to drought phases. And go back to 2024 when it was wet. Only 26% of the country was in dry to drought phases, meaning it was very, very wet. We do believe this will plummet to 44% of the country in dry to drought phases here by late summer, fall. Again, it'll take a bit of time here, but again, for sure for the eastern two-thirds of the country, the theme will become wetter. Not so in the west. They won't get their rains probably till late fall into early winter, but right now, 37% above average in terms of acres burned here. So right now we're off to a record fast start here, most in 10 plus years, 30,000 plus active fires and 2.4 million acres burned. So a crazy fast start here. And again, this will be unfortunately a theme as we go through the west this summer, early fall. No doubt about it. El Nino is going to be a strong. The question is how strong will it be? A near record event like 2016 or way back in the late 1800s here. But the consensus is a very strong, intense El Nino for sure. The one thing that's a little misleading here, again, so this is back 8-9 November here. It goes La Nina, this 9 November last year, below normal water temperatures. This is a cross-section across the Pacific, all the way from Australia to Ecuador, looking below the surface. And then now we see today here, again, this huge blob of very warm bubbling to the surface. But what's interesting here, you can already see the La Nina forming. So typically when you get a very strong El Nino, it will be followed very quickly by a La Nina, in fact, even a moderate, potentially strong La Nina. That would be more late 2027, 2028. So you can already see that cold water percolating there out between us, Central Australia and the international date line, again, below the surface here. So we can predict here we're going to have a strong El Nino, probably followed by a strong La Nina. It's a rapidly evolving pattern here. The one thing that's a little bit misleading here with the El Nino is that you can see that warm water in the equatorial Pacific there, but this is trends versus last year. If we look at the trends versus average here, you'll see that the North Pacific is still above average, quite warm. So there you see it here. So warm in the North Pacific, warm across the El Ninos. You don't have a massive transition zone. We like to see cold in the North Pacific, warm El Nino, and that'll create a more subtropical jet stream that can bring copious amounts of rain and snow to the U.S. during this cycle over the next 6 to 12 months here. So a little bit off in terms of the overall broad Pacific Ocean. Again, net, we still think we're going to get into a flooding scenario here as we get into the fall, winter seasons into early spring 2027. Look at last week's world summary here ending tonight here, 6 June here. Again, here in the U.S. it was 0.7 warmer than last year, 12th warmest in 41 years, above average. But hot days were actually down 6% and least in 9 years. So those really hot 90-degree days on an index basis nationally were way down, 20th least in 41 years. Drier, 18% drier, and dries in 3 years, 9th driest in 41. So warmer, drier, just wasn't extreme heat. Is good for seasonal merchandise sales, again, this time of year. Looking across Canada on the wet side, and just extremely wet. UK, Europe, Russia, #1 wettest in 41 plus years. Even down in Brazil had a little bit of moisture for their crops that are just about to be harvested here. Looking at severe weather here, didn't add much here this past week, a little bit of a lull here. So in fact, all metrics now are below last year's levels, and tornadoes are least in 5 years, hail cases least in 4 years, and wind least in 3 years. So we're kind of a softening trend here. Despite the severe weather we actually had here tonight, you can see that reflected in Severe Storms Prediction Center's forecast here had us in the bullseye zone, and we sure got it here this evening. So Saturday, those storms will shift Sunday into the plains, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday back into the plains for some severe weather. So we may see an uptick in those numbers here as we go into next week. Look at this week again. I think we're maybe going to cannibalize some Father's Day sales into this second week of June here because this is a hot week. 2.6 warmer than last year, warmest in 5, second hottest in 41 years. So this is a big trend. Again, you see actually cooling. This is a sign of that cold front's going to go through the Pacific Northwest and sweep all the way across the country here. So you'll see it right now in the Pacific Northwest. Hot days actually up. I haven't said that much here in the past few weeks. 30% hot up over last year, 7th most in 41 years, and rainfall while it's down about 7%, still 15th wettest, so above average. And look at all that rain in the Corn Belt. This is going to be a potentially record-shattering corn crop on top of a record-shattering crop last year. With the combination of the rains down in Brazil, again, I think this is going to lead to lowering prices here for corn. So they've already kind of made their plummet from, we got up around 480 plus. We're already kind of plummeting from that levels. Big map here, trends versus average. Small maps are versus last year. Real quick with the hurricane season here right now, the El Nino wind shear creates a lot of wind shear across the Atlantic and the basin here. So that's one factor limiting. The models were trying to flare up a big tropical storm in the Gulf. Didn't happen. Again, just too much wind shear. And then you got this dust coming off sub-Sahara Africa. That's another inhibiting factor here. So these combination of these events are going to actually lead to we believe, as do a lot of folks, that it'll be a soft hurricane season. That tends to suppress the real intense, Cat 3, 4, 5 storms. But it only takes one, as they say. Hurricane Andrew in the early 90s, again, was a very, I think only 7, 8 named systems that year. But again, we had a catastrophic storm hit Miami. And Florida is kind of a risky area for us again this year, southeast Florida as opposed to southwest Florida. Looking at next week here, week prior to Father's Day, now again, you can see that cold front's rapidly moving out of the Pacific Northwest. They're getting very hot, so cold to hot for them. And then Central Plains, again, go from hot to cold, and this will actually sweep. This is the weekly average now. This cold will actually be into the northeast, east coast by the Father's Day weekend. Overall, this week is down 1.7 colder than last year. Colds in 3, still 13th warmest. The hot days way down 35%, least in 3 years. 13th least in 41 years, so way below average here for the last couple of years that were way above average. This will be a soft trend here for sure. And precip 9% wetter, wettest in 7 years, 9th wettest in 41 years, so above average. So cooler, wetter, and less hot days. Again, this is kind of a suppressing factor for those Father's Day seasonal gift categories. So again, some of that may get cannibalized, we think, into the second week versus this week prior Father's Day. You can see this cold front here again sweeping across the country. So really hot ahead of it, and then cold in the Central Plains, and then heads all the way to the East Coast as we get toward Father's Day weekend, which looks to be cool for the eastern half of the country here. We agree these 2-week trends here. A little bit got to be careful here because we're going from hots to colds to warms. But the theme is, warm East Coast ahead of this front that'll be hit here by before Father's Day weekend. Cool there in Central Eastern Europe, and cool for parts of Brazil as well. Look at the rainfall trends here again. Very wet again across much of the U.S. here, Central U.S., Midwest, and even the East Coast, getting some much needed rain here over this 2-week period here. Eastern Europe is wet. Western Europe is a little on the dry side. And again, very wet down there in Brazil, again, for their crops. They probably don't need it at this stage. Their crops are probably already made and they're starting to harvest. So again, maybe too much here of a good thing here as they're trying to harvest. Don't forget you can get this newsletter, email, blog, video in your email every Saturday. So again, weathertrends360.com/newsletter/captains-log. Subscribe, and again, you'll have it every Saturday. So folks, have a great week ahead here, and we'll be back here this time next week.